The cold bit through my coat like it had a personal grudge. February in Milan wasn't supposed to feel this vicious, but the wind off the canals had other ideas. I stood outside Il Silo Nero, watching couples in cashmere and silk slip through the brass doors and wondered, not for the first time, what I was doing with my life. 23 years old, a linguistics degree gathering dust in a drawer, slinging espresso at a cafe by day, and working private events by night just to keep my grandmother's medications paid for. The agency called it luxury service staff. I called it invisibility with a uniform. Inside, the warmth hit me like a wall. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my annual rent, and the kind of hushed conversation that meant serious money was changing hands. I slipped into the service corridor, tying my black apron, smoothing my hair. The other servers moved like shadows, practiced, efficient, forgettable. I joined the choreography. "Table 12 needs champagne," Marco hissed, passing me with a tray of canapés. "And don't look at the guests, especially not the ones in the back room." I didn't ask why, I never did. The back room was separated by frosted glass panels that didn't quite hide the silhouettes inside. I counted 7 figures, all men, all motionless in that particular way that suggested they were used to being obeyed. The champagne bottles were already open, Krug, naturally, and I poured with the mechanical precision that comes from doing something 1,000 times. That's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I shouldn't have looked. We weren't supposed to carry phones during service. But Nana's hospital had called twice already that week, and the vibration sent ice through my veins that had nothing to do with the weather outside. I set down the bottle and stepped into the hallway, hands shaking as I answered. "Pronto?" My voice came out in Italian automatically, the language of my childhood, of my grandmother's bedtime stories, of the only family I had left. The nurse's words blurred together. Pneumonia, complications. They were doing what they could, but I should come soon, very soon. I don't know how long I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, speaking rapid Italian that felt like glass in my throat. The hallway tilted. I braced myself against the wall, trying to remember how to breathe, trying to calculate how many shifts I'd need to cover another hospital stay, trying not to imagine. "Quanto tempo?" I whispered. "How long?" "Difficile dirlo, forse giorni, forse meno." "Days, maybe less." I ended the call and stood frozen, staring at nothing, everything inside me screaming. "Miss." The voice came from behind me, low, controlled, with an accent I couldn't quite place. American, maybe, or someone who'd spent significant time there. I turned, already forming an apology, and found myself looking at a man who didn't belong in service corridors. He wore a charcoal suit that moved like water, black shirt open at the collar, no tie. Dark hair swept back, sharp jaw, eyes the color of espresso. But it was the way he stood that made my breath catch, utterly still, utterly certain, like he'd never questioned his right to any space he occupied. "I'm sorry," I managed. "I was just—" "You speak Italian, not a question." "Yes, it's yes." He studied me with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. Like he was reading a document, cataloging information, making decisions I couldn't see. "Fluent." "Native, my grandmother," I stopped, realizing I was explaining myself to a stranger. I should get back to work. "Where did you learn?" The question held weight I didn't understand. I hugged my arms around myself. "Rome. We moved here when I was 12, but I grew up speaking it." He nodded once, still watching me with those dark, measuring eyes. Then he pulled out his phone and spoke quietly to someone I couldn't hear. "Bring me Chiara Santoro's file." My blood went cold. "How do you know my name?" "Your badge." He gestured to the laminated card clipped to my apron. "And because I own this building." The world shifted slightly. This was Dante Caruso. I'd heard the name whispered in the service corridor, always with a particular edge, Respect, fear, something darker. Real estate, they said. Import-export. The kind of businesses that had too many subsidiary companies and not enough specifics. I need to get back to work, I said again, but my voice had lost conviction. Your grandmother is in hospital Magyar. Still not a question. How did pneumonia, complicated by her existing condition. The nurses believe she has days. I stared at him, something between panic and fury rising in my throat. Have you been listening? No, but you were speaking loudly enough that anyone in the corridor could hear, and you looked like someone who just had their world pulled out from under them. He slipped his phone back into his pocket. I recognized the expression. I don't need your pity. Good, I'm not offering it. He stepped closer and I caught the scent of his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. I'm offering you a job. I have a job. You have 3 jobs, Miss Santoro. None of them pay enough to cover your grandmother's medical expenses, which is why you're 2 months behind on her supplemental care, and the hospital is preparing to move her to the public ward. The hallway felt like it was closing in. How do you? I make it my business to know things, especially when someone demonstrates a skill I need. He drew a card from his pocket, heavy stock, embossed lettering. I have business in Switzerland next week. I need a translator who's discreet, competent, and understands that some conversations aren't meant to be repeated. I'm not. 10,000 euros. 5 now, 5 when we return, plus all expenses. The number hit me like a fist. 10,000 euros would cover Nana's care for 6 months, maybe longer if I was careful. What kind of business? The legal kind, mostly. His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. Nothing that would put you in danger, you have my word. I wanted to laugh. His word. From a man who ran whatever operation required frosted glass panels and security that didn't blink. But Nana had days, maybe less. I need to think. You have 30 seconds. Not cruel, just factual. After that I'll find someone else, and you'll go back to pouring champagne while your grandmother dies in a public ward. The words should have been vicious. Instead, they were simply true. I looked at the card in his hand, looked at the phone in mine, thought about Nana's face, the way she still smiled when I visited, pretending she didn't see how exhausted I was, pretending she wasn't afraid. 20 seconds. I took the card. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or recognition. Be at this address tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Bring a passport and 1 bag, someone will collect you. He turned to leave, then paused. And Miss Santoro, whatever you just agreed to, it wasn't charity. You'll earn every euro. He disappeared into the back room, and I stood alone in the corridor, holding a business card that felt like a door I couldn't close once I walked through it. My phone buzzed again, the hospital. I looked at the card, at the embossed address, at the number that could save Nana's life. Then I slipped it into my pocket and went back to work, hands steady now, mind racing toward a tomorrow I couldn't predict. The champagne poured smooth and cold, and in the frosted glass panels behind me, I saw Dante Caruso watching. He didn't smile, but he nodded once, and somehow that felt more binding than any contract. I didn't sleep. How could I? The card sat on my nightstand like a live thing, the address burned into my brain, via Monte Napoleon 18, penthouse suite, the kind of address that regular people only saw in magazines. At 4 a.m. I gave up, showered, and stared at my closet. 1 bag, he'd said. I owned 3 professional outfits, all of them cheap polyester pretending to be wool. My linguistics textbooks took up half the space. I packed 2 pairs of jeans, the least wrinkled blouses, and my grandmother's rosary, not because I was religious, but because it smelled like her perfume. The hospital called at 5. No change, but I should come when I could. I sat on the edge of my bed, rosary wrapped around my fingers, and made myself say it out loud. I'm leaving the country with a man I don't know because he's paying me more money than I've ever seen. It sounded insane. It sounded like survival. At 5:40, I was standing outside my apartment building when a black Mercedes pulled up, silent as a shadow. The driver was older, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had seen everything and judged nothing. He opened the rear door without a word. "I can sit in front," I said. Mr. Caruso prefers his associates to be comfortable. Not rude, just factual. Miss Santoro. Associate. The word felt like a coat that didn't fit quite right. The interior was leather and silence. We glided through Milan's empty streets, past shuttered cafes and sleeping piazzas, until the car pulled into an underground garage that belonged in a spy movie. Concrete pillars, security cameras, vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. The elevator required a key card. We rose in silence, past the commercial floors, past the residential levels, into the stratosphere where air probably cost extra. The doors opened directly into a space that redefined everything I thought I knew about apartments. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Milan's skyline, furniture that looked like sculpture, art on the walls that might have been original or might have been perfect forgeries, either way, impressive. And at the windows, silhouetted against the dawn, Dante Caruso stood with a phone pressed to his ear, speaking German. He didn't turn when I entered, just gestured toward a sitting area with one hand while continuing his conversation. The driver set my bag down and disappeared. I perched on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than my monthly rent and tried not to gape. Dante's German was flawless. I couldn't understand all of it, but the cadence was native level, the idioms natural. He spoke for another 3 minutes, then ended the call and turned to face me. In daylight, he was even more striking. Sharp features that suggested Mediterranean ancestry, but those eyes were pure calculation. He wore different clothes, dark jeans, a black sweater that probably cost a fortune, but the same certainty, the same absolute control. Coffee? He gestured toward a side table where an espresso service sat waiting. I'm fine. You look exhausted. Coffee isn't a request. He poured 2 cups, added sugar to his, and handed me the other. We leave in 40 minutes. Before that, some ground rules. I wrapped my hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth. First, everything you see, hear, or translate remains confidential. You discuss nothing with anyone, not friends, not family, not the police if they somehow get interested. Understood. What if someone asks? Tell them you're working as a private translator for a consultant. Vague, boring, true enough. He sipped his espresso. Second, you follow my lead in all situations. If I tell you we're leaving, we leave. If I introduce you as my cousin, you're my cousin. If I say a conversation isn't happening, it isn't happening. You want me to lie. I want you to be smart. There's a difference. He set his cup down. Third, you'll have access to resources, clothing, transportation, accommodation. Don't mistake that for ownership. You're being paid to do a job, not audition for a different role. The implication stung more than it should have. I'm not. I know, but women in your position sometimes misunderstand the arrangement. I'm clarifying so we don't waste time later. His tone wasn't cruel, just clinical. You're here because you speak native Italian and you need money. I'm here because I need someone I can control through incentive rather than coercion. We both get what we need. Clean transaction. I wanted to throw the espresso in his face. Instead, I drank it because it was excellent and I was exhausted and he was right. Fourth, your grandmother. I've arranged for a private room at the hospital and consulted with a pulmonologist who specializes in geriatric care. He'll evaluate her this morning. My hand froze halfway to my mouth. You what? You can't work effectively if you're worried she's dying alone in a public ward. This removes that distraction. He pulled a folder from the side table and slid it across to me. Dr. Emil Hoffman, Swiss, trained at Johns Hopkins, currently consulting in Milan. He's expensive, but he's the best. I opened the folder with shaking hands. It was all there: appointment confirmation, doctor's credentials, a treatment plan that looked like it had been written by someone who actually cared. Why would you? Because 10,000 euros is meaningless if you're useless to me. Consider it an investment in your focus. He checked his watch. The advance is already in your account. 5,000. You can verify. I pulled out my phone, logged into my banking app, and felt the world tilt. 5,000 euros. Actually there. Actually real. The car will take you to the hospital. You have 90 minutes to see your grandmother and meet with Dr. Hoffman. Then we leave for the airport. He stood, conversation clearly over. Don't be late, Miss Santoro. I don't wait. Why Italian? The question burst out before I could stop it. You speak German, probably other languages. Why do you need me? He paused at the window, backlit by the rising sun. Because the people I'm meeting trust their own language more than English, and because trust is the only currency that matters in my world. I thought money mattered. Money is how you keep score. He turned, and for the first time I saw something that wasn't calculation, maybe amusement, maybe respect. Trust is how you stay alive. The driver appeared in the doorway, silent as a ghost. 90 minutes, Dante repeated. The clock started 5 minutes ago. I grabbed my bag and followed the driver to the elevator, mind spinning, heart racing. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: your grandmother is comfortable. Dr. Hoffman is with her now. Focus on your work. D. I looked back, but the elevator doors were already closing. Through the narrowing gap, I saw Dante at the windows, phone to his ear again, running his empire from the stratosphere. And I realized with perfect clarity that I just sold my autonomy to a man who collected people the way others collected art. Beautifully, deliberately, and with no intention of letting go. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and fear, but Nana's new room smelled like lavender. Someone had brought flowers, white roses in a crystal vase, and the machines monitoring her vitals were newer, quieter, less like harbingers of death. She was awake, propped against pillows, looking smaller than I remembered but more comfortable. Dr. Hoffman stood beside her bed, making notes, his expression professionally neutral. Chiara, Nana whispered, her voice thin but steady, they tell me you've come into money. I took her hand, papery and cool, something like that. Dr. Hoffman looked up, glacier blue eyes assessing. Miss Santoro, your grandmother is stable for now. The pneumonia is responding to antibiotics, but her underlying condition remains serious. I've recommended a treatment plan that should improve her quality of life significantly. How much time does she have? That's not a question I can answer with certainty. Months, possibly longer if she responds well to treatment. He closed his folder. She's stronger than her chart suggests. Nana squeezed my hand. I told him I'm too stubborn to die in February, too cold. I laughed, but it came out broken. Dr. Hoffman excused himself, leaving instructions with the nurses. When we were alone, Nana studied me with eyes that had seen 78 years of truth and lies. Who is he? Who? The man who pays for Swiss doctors and private rooms. Don't insult me by pretending this is luck. I perched on the edge of her bed. His name is Dante Caruso. I'm working as his translator. Caruso. She said the name like she was tasting wine, testing for poison. There was a Caruso family in Rome when I was young. Importers. The kind who imported things the government didn't want imported. Nana. I'm old, not stupid, and I've seen enough of the world to know when someone is dangerous. She touched my cheek. Is he dangerous? I thought about Dante's eyes, the way he'd catalogued me in that corridor, the precision with which he'd dismantled my life and offered me a different one. Yes. Do you trust him? I don't know him. That's not what I asked. I looked at the flowers, the machines, the private room that represented a lifeline I couldn't have afforded on my own. He keeps his word, I said finally. I think that matters to him more than being good. Nana nodded slowly. Then be careful, Tesoro. Men like that, they trade in debts, and debts become chains if you're not watching. I won't let that happen. I know you won't. You're stronger than you think. She settled back against the pillows, exhaustion pulling at her features. But promise me something. Anything. Don't let him make you forget who you are. Money changes people. Power changes them more. I kissed her forehead, breathing in lavender and the ghost of her perfume. I promise. When I left, Dr. Hoffman was waiting in the corridor. He handed me a card with his personal number. Call me if you have questions. Your grandmother is in good hands. Thank you, I don't know how to. Mr. Caruso has already handled compensation. But for what it's worth, your grandmother is remarkable. It's an honor to treat her. He paused. And Miss Santoro, whatever arrangement you've made with Mr. Caruso, be very certain you understand all the terms before you're too far in to negotiate. He walked away before I could respond, white coat disappearing around a corner. I stood in the hospital corridor, surrounded by the quiet beeping of machines and the shuffle of nurses, and felt the weight of what I'd agreed to settle over my shoulders like a coat made of lead. My phone buzzed, the driver waiting outside, time to go. I took the elevator down, walked through the automatic doors, and found the Mercedes idling at the curb. This time Dante was in the back seat, working on a laptop, barely glancing up when I slid in beside him. Everything settled. Yes. Good, we have a slight detour. He closed the laptop. There's a boutique in Quadrilatero. You need appropriate clothing for where we're going. I have. You have polyester and good intentions. Neither will work in Zurich. He pulled out his phone, sent a rapid text. 15 minutes, in and out. Consider it part of the investment. The boutique was the kind of place where you needed an appointment to browse. No prices in the windows, just a single dress displayed like it was in a museum. A woman met us at the door, elegant, 60-ish, with the kind of smile that assessed your net worth in 3 seconds. Mr. Caruso, a pleasure. Gabriella, my associate needs a working wardrobe. Conservative, professional, suitable for business meetings in Switzerland. You have 20 minutes. Gabriella's eyes flicked to me, cataloging everything. My cheap coat, my scuffed boots, the exhaustion I couldn't hide. But her smile never wavered. Of course, this way, miss. Santoro, I supplied. She led me into a dressing room that was larger than my bedroom, with mirrors that showed every unflattering angle. Within minutes, she'd assembled options: wool trousers in charcoal and navy, silk blouses in cream and pale blue, a blazer that moved like water, leather boots that probably cost a month's rent. Try these. I hesitated, looking at the price tags I couldn't see but could imagine. Mr. Caruso is covering this, Gabriella said gently. And trust me, Cara, you'll need armor where you're going. Consider this your first set. The clothes fit perfectly, tailored, expensive, transformative. When I stepped out of the dressing room, Dante looked up from his phone, and something flickered across his face too quickly to name. Better was all he said. Gabriella, send everything to the airport. We're leaving now. In the car, wearing my new clothes and feeling like a fraud, I finally asked the question that had been burning since yesterday. What exactly am I translating? Dante looked out the window at Milan sliding past. Conversations, contracts, the occasional threat disguised as a business proposition. And if I refuse to translate a threat, then I'll know you have boundaries and I'll adjust accordingly. He turned to face me. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal, Miss Santoro, just accurate. If someone says they're going to kill me in Italian, I'd appreciate knowing before they try. Has that happened? Twice. Both times I was prepared, so it didn't take. He said it like he was discussing the weather. You'll find that most business, even the questionable kind, is about information. Who knows what, who's willing to pay for it, and who's willing to kill to keep it quiet. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be reassuring, it's meant to be honest. He handed me a passport, my passport somehow acquired in the last 24 hours. You asked earlier why you. Here's the real answer. Because you're desperate enough to say yes, smart enough to be useful, and poor enough that you won't become a liability. You need me more than I need you, which means you'll work harder to prove your value. The words should have been insulting. Instead, they were just true. And when you don't need me anymore, then you'll have earned enough money to change your circumstances and we'll part ways. He shifted, angling toward me. I'm not a good man, Miss Santoro, but I'm an honest one within my particular moral framework. I won't lie to you, I won't cheat you, and I won't let anyone hurt you while you're under my protection. In return, you do the job and keep my secrets. Simple. Nothing about this is simple. No, he agreed, but it's fair, and in my world that's more than most people get. The airport wasn't the public terminal. Instead, we pulled onto a private tarmac where a jet waited, white and sleek, with a logo I didn't recognize. Staff appeared to handle luggage, and Dante guided me up the stairs with a hand at the small of my back, not pushing, just present, a touch that felt like both protection and possession. Inside, the jet was all cream leather and polished wood. Dante settled into a seat and opened his laptop. I took the seat across from him, still processing. We'll land in Zurich in 90 minutes, he said without looking up. Rest if you can. Tonight's dinner is important and I need you sharp. What kind of dinner? The kind where everyone is armed and pretending they're not. The kind where deals get made or people get killed. He glanced up. Don't worry, you're just there to translate. No one will expect you to participate. That's definitely not reassuring. This time he smiled, a real smile, unexpected and brief. Good, fear keeps you careful, careful keeps you alive. The jet's engines rumbled to life. Through the window, I watched Milan disappear beneath clouds and felt the last threads connecting me to my old life snap and fall away. Across from me, Dante worked in silence, running an empire I didn't understand with tools I couldn't see. And somewhere below, my grandmother slept in a private room paid for with money that came from sources I was afraid to question. I'd walked through the door. Now I had to survive the house on the other side. Zurich was colder than Milan, sharper, like the city itself was made of cut glass. The car that met us at the airport was another Mercedes, black, anonymous, bulletproof if I was reading the weight of the doors correctly. Dante made 3 calls during the drive, all in German, switching between dialects I couldn't quite follow. The hotel was discreet. No obvious branding, just an address that looked like every other building on the street until you stepped inside and saw the marble, the art, the hushed efficiency of staff who knew exactly who mattered and who didn't. We have adjacent suites, Dante said as we rode the elevator. You'll have 3 hours to rest and prepare. Dinner is at 8, where the navy dress Gabriella packed, conservative jewelry, minimal makeup. I don't have jewelry. He handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a strand of pearls, real ones, glowing with that unmistakable luster. My throat went tight. I can't. They're a loan, not a gift. Consider them part of the costume. The elevator doors opened. They also have a tracker embedded in the clasp, so if anything goes wrong, I'll know where you are. I stared at him. That's practical. You're walking into a room full of dangerous people. I'd prefer to retrieve you intact if it becomes necessary. He opened the door to my suite, not a room, a suite, with windows overlooking the lake and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Rest. Eat something. Review basic Italian business terms if you need to feel prepared. I'll collect you at 7:45. He disappeared into the adjoining suite before I could respond. I set the pearls on the dresser and collapsed onto the bed, which was softer than clouds and smelled like expensive linen. My phone had 17 missed calls, friends wondering where I was, the cafe asking about my shifts, the hospital with updates. I texted quick responses, vague and soothing, and felt like a liar. But Nana was comfortable. Dr. Hoffman had sent a detailed report. Her vitals were improving, the pneumonia was responding to treatment, and she'd eaten solid food for the first time in days. 5,000 euros bought a lot of miracles. I showered, standing under water hot enough to scald, trying to wash away the feeling that I'd sold something more valuable than my time. The navy dress fit perfectly, sophisticated and modest, the kind of thing I'd have worn to a job interview at the UN. The pearls felt like a collar, beautiful and binding. At 7:45 exactly, Dante knocked. He wore a dark suit, perfectly tailored, with a black shirt and a silver tie clip that probably cost more than my education. His cologne was different, lighter, more citrus, and I realized he'd chosen it deliberately, adjusting even his scent for the audience. "You look appropriate," he said, which I supposed was a compliment in his world. "Who will we be meeting?" 3 Swiss bankers, 2 Austrian logistics coordinators, and 1 very nervous Italian lawyer who's acting as an intermediary. The bankers want to understand why I'm moving assets through their institutions. The Austrians want reassurance that a recent shipment delay won't become a pattern. The Italian wants to survive the evening without anyone noticing how much he's sweating. "And what do you want?" "To make everyone believe I'm exactly what they need me to be." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. "Stay close, translate accurately, and don't react to anything you hear. Some of these conversations will be shocking. Your job is to be invisible while making me omniscient." The restaurant was tucked into a building that looked residential from the outside. No sign, no obvious entrance, just a brass plate with a name I didn't recognize. Inside, it was all dark wood and candlelight, with tables spaced far enough apart that conversation stayed private. We were led to a private room where 6 men waited, drinks already poured, expressions carefully neutral. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in controlled violence disguised as business. The Swiss bankers spoke in careful euphemisms about transaction patterns and regulatory exposure, which translated roughly to "we know you're laundering money and we'd like to understand how much risk we're assuming." Dante responded with spreadsheets and assurances, his Italian smooth as silk as I translated, his numbers somehow both specific and meaningless. The Austrians were blunter. A shipment had been delayed at the border, agricultural equipment they called it, though I suspected that was code for something considerably less innocent. They wanted compensation. Dante offered a discount on future services and a contact who could expedite customs approvals. They accepted, satisfied. The Italian lawyer barely spoke, just sweated through his collar and took notes he'd probably burn later. But it was during dessert that things shifted. One of the bankers switched to rapid Italian, not the formal business dialect, but something regional, Sicilian-inflected, clearly testing whether I'd catch the nuance. He was asking about another client, someone Dante had apparently displaced, wondering if the transition had been permanent. I translated exactly what he said, keeping my voice level, my expression blank. Dante smiled. "Tell Signor Bianchi that all transitions in my world are permanent, and tell him in Sicilian so he understands I always know what's being said." I did, matching the dialect, watching Bianchi's face go carefully neutral. After that, the conversation stayed respectful. We left at 10, Dante's hand at the small of my back again as we navigated the dark Zurich streets. In the car, he finally spoke. "You did well, better than I expected." Is that what your business is? Threatening people in expensive restaurants? Sometimes. Other times it's arbitrage and logistics. Tonight was about establishing clarity. He looked at me, and in the dim light from the street lamps his face was all shadows. You heard what they were really asking. The Sicilian banker wasn't testing your Italian. He was testing whether I trusted you enough to let you hear the truth. Which is that someone wanted me dead and I made sure they died first, permanently. He said it without inflection, without apology. Does that bother you? It should have. It should have sent me running. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know what I expected, but that conversation felt like theater. It was. Most of my work is theater, convincing people I'm more dangerous than I am, or less dangerous than I am, depending on what I need. Violence is expensive and attracts attention. Much better to make people believe I'm capable of it and never have to prove it. But you are capable of it. Yes, no hesitation. I'm capable of a lot of things, Miss Santoro, but I prefer the efficient path. And efficiency usually means money, information, and the right pressure applied at the right moment. Back at the hotel, he walked me to my suite. At the door, he reached for the pearls and I flinched. They're yours for the week, he said quietly. I'm just adjusting the clasp, it's sitting too loose. His fingers brushed my nape, warm and deliberate, and I felt that touch everywhere. He worked the clasp with surgical precision, then stepped back. Tomorrow we have 2 meetings. One legitimate, one less so. Get some rest, you'll need it. Mr. Caruso. Dante, we're past formality at this point. Dante, I corrected, the name strange on my tongue. What happens if I want to stop, if this becomes? If it becomes too much, you tell me, and we renegotiate. He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw something that wasn't calculation, maybe honesty, maybe warning. But understand that once you're in, you're in. There's no going back to pouring champagne and pretending you don't know what you know. The moment you translated that conversation tonight, you became complicit. Not legally, perhaps, but functionally. The words settled over me like snow, cold and inescapable. So I'm trapped. You're invested. There's a difference. You can still walk away. I'll honor the 5,000 you've already earned and arrange for your grandmother's care to continue for 3 months. After that, you're on your own. He tilted his head. Or you can finish the week, take the full 10,000 and walk away with enough money to change your circumstances. Your choice. That's not really a choice. No, he agreed. But it's more than most people get. Sleep well, Miss Santoro. Tomorrow gets more interesting. He disappeared into his suite, and I stood alone in the hallway, pearls heavy around my throat, feeling like I'd just signed a contract written in a language I'd only begun to understand. Inside my room, I locked the door and leaned against it, heart racing. My phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Your grandmother is resting comfortably. Dr. Hoffman reports continued improvement. No need to worry. I looked at the message, at the pearls in the mirror, at the reflection of a woman I barely recognized. Then I climbed into bed and lay awake until dawn, listening to the silence of a foreign city and wondering what I'd become by the time this week ended. The morning meetings were legitimate, or at least, they wore legitimacy like an expensive suit. A Swiss holding company looking to invest in Italian real estate. Contracts full of clauses that needed careful translation, terms that shifted meaning depending on context. I sat beside Dante in a conference room overlooking Lake Zurich and translated real estate law for 3 hours straight, until my voice was hoarse and my brain felt like static. Dante was a different person in these meetings, charming, precise, dropping references to Zurich's history and Swiss banking culture that made the investors smile. He signed papers with a fountain pen that probably cost more than my old car, and when we left, he'd secured financing for a development in Rome that would either make him millions or bury him in debt. Which is it? I asked in the car. Millions or debt? Both, probably. Real estate is a long game, but the property has a basement that's useful for storage and the investors don't ask questions about what I'm storing. He checked his phone. We have 2 hours before the next meeting. Let's eat. Lunch was at a cafe overlooking the river, normal, almost painfully normal, with tourists and business people and the kind of anonymity that comes from being in a public place. Dante ordered in German, switching effortlessly, and I realized he did that constantly. Linguistic camouflage, adapting to whatever room he occupied. You grew up speaking Italian, he said over coffee. Where else have you lived? Just Milan. My grandmother moved us here when I was 12, after my parents died. How did they die? The question was clinical, not sympathetic. I appreciated that. Car accident in Rome, wrong place, wrong time. I looked out at the river. Nana said it was God's will. I said it was bad luck. We agreed to disagree. And you never went back to Rome. Once for their funeral, everything felt wrong, like the city had changed or I had. I shrugged. Milan felt safer, smaller. Nothing about Milan is small. No, but I could be small in it, invisible. I met his eyes. Which was the point, I think. After losing them, I wanted to disappear. Something shifted in his expression, recognition maybe. I understand that impulse. Do you? I grew up in the margins. My father ran a shipping company in Naples, legitimate on the surface, less so underneath. When he died, I inherited his debts and his enemies. I spent 5 years making myself indispensable to the people who would have killed me otherwise. He drank his coffee like it was fuel, not pleasure. Invisibility is a luxury I never had. So I went the opposite direction, made myself so visible, so essential, that removing me became more expensive than tolerating me. And now I'm building something different. Legitimate infrastructure funded by questionable sources, gradually shifting the balance until the business can stand on its own. He leaned back. That's what today is about. The meeting tonight, that's about managing the questionable sources who'd prefer I stay dependent. Is it dangerous? Everything's dangerous, Miss Santoro. The question is whether it's manageable. He paid the check and stood. Come on. I want to show you something before we dive back into the theater. He took me to a museum, small, private, dedicated to Renaissance art. We walked through galleries filled with paintings I'd only seen in textbooks, and Dante spoke about them with genuine knowledge, pointing out techniques and historical context I'd never have noticed. You like art, I said, surprised. I like things that last, paintings, buildings, ideas that survive centuries. He stopped in front of a portrait, a young woman in pearls, her expression enigmatic. My father collected art. Most of it was stolen or forged, but he taught me to see the difference, to recognize when something was real. Is that what you do, recognize what's real? Among other things, he studied the painting. You're real, Miss Santoro, that's why I hired you. Everyone else in my world is performing, acting out roles, saying what they think I want to hear. You're too desperate to lie effectively, which makes you valuable. That's not a compliment. It's not meant to be, it's an observation. He turned to face me. Tonight you'll meet someone who wants to kill me. He'll be charming, gracious, and completely sincere. He'll ask you questions designed to test my trust in you. Answer honestly within the boundaries I've set and we'll be fine. Lie to protect me and he'll know, and then we'll both be in danger. My mouth went dry. Why would you bring me to? Because running would confirm his suspicions. Better to face it directly and prove there's nothing to hide. He checked his watch. 2 hours, back to the hotel. Navy suit this time, pearls again. And Miss Santoro, tonight trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. I reviewed Italian business vocabulary I already knew, just for something to do with my hands. The navy suit fit perfectly. The pearls felt heavier than before, and I wondered if that was psychological or if the tracker added actual weight. Dante collected me at 7, his expression unreadable. Remember, translate accurately, show no reaction, and if he asks you a direct question, answer truthfully within reason. He's testing me, not you, but you're the tool he'll use. The meeting wasn't at a restaurant this time. It was at a private home in the hills above Zurich, old money, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. The man who opened the door was 60-ish, silver-haired, with the kind of face that belonged in a boardroom or a funeral home. Dante, a pleasure. His Italian was Tuscan perfect. And this must be Miss Santoro, your reputation precedes you. I had no reputation, but I smiled and shook his hand, and followed both men into a study lined with books I suspected had never been read. His name was Lorenzo Marchetti, and within 5 minutes I understood why Dante was worried. Marchetti was smooth as glass, charming as poison, and every question he asked was a trap disguised as conversation. He asked about my grandmother, about how I'd met Dante, about my education, my languages, my plans after this week. And he did it while smiling, while pouring wine, while acting like a concerned uncle rather than a predator circling his prey. I answered carefully, sticking to the framework Dante had given me, hired as a translator, grateful for the work, aware it was temporary. I didn't lie, but I didn't elaborate. The real conversation happened in rapid Italian between Dante and Marchetti, too fast and too coded for clean translation. They were talking about territories, about shipments, about someone named Gianni who'd retired to the countryside. I caught enough to understand they were negotiating a truce, and that Marchetti thought he had leverage. Then Marchetti turned to me, still smiling. Miss Santoro, a hypothetical question. If you discovered your employer was involved in activities that troubled your conscience, what would you do? The room went silent. Dante's expression didn't change, but I felt the tension coil. I met Marchetti's eyes. I suppose that would depend on whether those activities violated the terms of my employment. And those terms are confidential, signor, between me and my employer. Marchetti's smile widened. Loyalty, how refreshing. Tell me, did Dante offer you money or something more valuable? He offered me a job, I accepted. Everything else is negotiation. I kept my voice steady. With respect, senor, I'm here to translate business discussions, not to be interrogated about my motivations. Something flickered in Marchetti's eyes, surprise, maybe respect. He glanced at Dante, who sipped his wine with perfect calm. She has spine, I approve. Marchetti set down his glass. Very well, let's discuss the Gianni situation without testing your translator's patience further. The rest of the meeting was business, cold, precise, dangerous in its implications but civil in its execution. They reached an agreement about territories, about timelines, about what would happen if either party violated the terms. When we left, 90 minutes later, Dante's hand at my back felt more protective than possessive. In the car, he finally spoke. That was risky. What I said. How you said it. Marchetti respects strength, but only to a point. Push too hard and he'd have taken it as an insult. I wasn't trying to be strong. I was trying not to lie. I looked at him. Would he really have killed you if I'd said the wrong thing? Eventually. Not tonight, too public, too obvious, but he'd have started planning. Dante's jaw was tight. He's been trying to undermine me for 2 years. Tonight was about testing whether you were a vulnerability he could exploit. And am I? He turned to face me, and in the passing streetlights his eyes were unreadable. I don't know yet. That's the problem. Back at the hotel, he walked me to my suite again. At the door, he reached for the pearls, and this time I didn't flinch. His fingers brushed my nape as he unfastened the clasp, and the touch lingered longer than necessary. The pearls came away, and he held them up to the light. Still intact, good. The tracker or the pearls? Both. He pocketed them. Tomorrow we return to Milan. You'll have 2 days off to see your grandmother and decide if you want to continue. Continue. There's more work if you want it, not just translation, coordination, liaison presence. The kind of work that pays better than 10,000 for a week. He studied me. But only if you're certain. After tonight, Marchetti knows your face. If you walk away, you'll need to be careful. If you stay, you'll need to be smarter. I should have said no. Should have taken my 5,000 euros and disappeared into Milan's anonymous crowds. But Nana was improving. Dr. Hoffman's reports were optimistic, and somewhere in the last 3 days, I'd stopped feeling invisible. I'll think about it. Good, that means you're not an idiot. He stepped back. Sleep well, Miss Santoro. Tomorrow's flight leaves at noon. He disappeared, and I went inside, locked the door, and sat on the bed with my head in my hands. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your performance tonight was noted. Be very careful, Miss Santoro. Not everyone is impressed by spine. LM. I stared at the message, ice spreading through my chest. Then a second text from Dante. Ignore Marchetti. He's testing boundaries. Focus on your grandmother and the choice ahead. Everything else is noise. I deleted both messages and lay down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged me under. And dreamed of pearls that tightened like chains, beautiful and inescapable. Milan felt different when we landed, colder, grayer, like the city itself had judged my absence and found it wanting. Dante's driver took us directly to the hospital, where Dr. Hoffman met us in the corridor with a smile I hadn't expected. Your grandmother is doing remarkably well. The pneumonia is nearly resolved, and her vitals are stronger than they've been in months. He handed me a tablet showing charts I couldn't fully interpret but understood enough. I'd like to keep her under observation for another week, then transition her to a home care arrangement if you're comfortable with that. Home care. A visiting nurse twice daily. Medication management, physical therapy, monitoring. She'll be more comfortable at home, and frankly, hospitals are dangerous places for the elderly, infections, falls, the psychological toll. He glanced at Dante. Mr. Caruso mentioned you'd be returning to work. The care arrangement would give you flexibility. I looked at Dante, who was reviewing something on his phone and giving me no indication of what he wanted me to say. How much would that cost? Dr. Hoffman named a figure that made my stomach drop, manageable with the money I'd already earned, impossible on my old salary. I'll need to think. The arrangements are already made, Dante said without looking up. Dr. Hoffman, proceed as recommended. Miss Santoro's grandmother will have whatever she needs. Wait. We'll discuss it later. He pocketed his phone. May we see her? Nana was sitting up in bed, looking more like herself, color in her cheeks, sharpness in her eyes. She smiled when she saw me, then looked past me to Dante, and something complicated crossed her face. So you're the mysterious benefactor. Dante inclined his head. Dante Caruso, Signora, it's an honor. Caruso. She said the name like she was tasting it again. You have your father's eyes. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Dante went very still. You knew my father. I knew of him. Rome was smaller then and certain families were visible. She gestured to the chair beside her bed. Sit. Tell me why you're spending a fortune on an old woman's health. Nana. Hush, Tesoro, I'm old, not senile. Mr. Caruso doesn't strike me as a charity case. She fixed Dante with a stare that had probably terrified me as a child. So, why? Dante sat and I saw him make a calculation. How much truth, how much deflection? Your granddaughter has a skill I need. Keeping her focused requires removing distractions. Your health was a distraction. Therefore, I removed it. That's remarkably cold. Yes, but it's honest. He leaned forward slightly. I'm not a good man, Signora Santoro, but I keep my agreements and I don't waste resources. Chiara is valuable to me. ensuring she can work without worry serves my interests. And her interests are aligned with mine for now. She's being compensated fairly, protected appropriately, and given opportunities she wouldn't have otherwise. He glanced at me, then back to Nana. If you're asking whether I'm exploiting her, yes, in the sense that all employment is exploitation. But I'm not lying to her about the terms, and I'm not putting her in unnecessary danger. Nana studied him for a long moment. You're very like your father. He had the same way of making terrible things sound reasonable. My father was a criminal who died in debt to worse criminals. I'm trying to build something different. Are you succeeding? Ask me in 5 years. Dante stood. I'll leave you two alone. Miss Santoro will speak tomorrow about next steps. He left, and Nana turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. He's dangerous, Kara. I know. Do you, really? She took my hand. I knew his father, not well but enough to know he destroyed everyone close to him, not through cruelty, through certainty. He believed his way was right and everyone else was just scenery. Dante's not his father. No, he's worse because he's smarter. His father was a thug with ambition. Dante is a strategist with charm. That's infinitely more dangerous. She squeezed my hand. I won't tell you to stop. You need the money and I need the care. But promise me you'll remember who you are underneath all of this. Don't let him make you into a tool that only works for him. I won't. You already have. You're wearing clothes he bought, working a job he created, speaking to people you'd never have met. That's not wrong, it's survival. But survival can become a trap if you're not careful. I wanted to argue, couldn't. We sat together for another hour, talking about nothing. The hospital food, the nurses, the ridiculous reality TV show Nana had discovered. Normal things, comforting things. Things that felt increasingly distant from the life I was building. When I left, Dr. Hoffman walked me to the elevator. Your grandmother is remarkable, but she's right to be worried. I looked at him sharply. You were listening. Hospitals have ears, and I've worked with men like Mr. Caruso before. Offshore accounts, cash payments, patients who arrive without insurance and leave without records. He handed me his card again. If you need anything, advice, assistance, a way out, call me. No judgment, no questions. Why would you? Because I'm a doctor and my job is to protect people, even the ones who don't realize they're in danger yet. He stepped into the elevator. Be smart, Miss Santoro, and be ready to run if you need to. The doors closed, leaving me alone in the corridor again, surrounded by the ghost of good advice I wasn't sure I could follow. My phone buzzed. Dante, dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m. My apartment, we'll discuss your decision. Come prepared to negotiate. I stared at the message, feeling like I was standing at the edge of a cliff with wind at my back and no way to climb down. Then I texted back, I'll be there, and walked out into the February cold, already knowing what my answer would be. Dante's apartment looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more lived in. Books on the shelves I hadn't noticed before, art that suggested actual taste rather than investment strategy. He answered the door in jeans and a sweater, barefoot, which somehow made him more dangerous rather than less. Whined. Please. He poured 2 glasses of something red and expensive, and we sat at the table where dinner was already laid out. Simple, elegant, the kind of meal you couldn't fake. Homemade pasta, fresh bread, salad that looked like someone had cared about the presentation. You cook? My grandmother insisted. She said a man who can't feed himself is a man who's already dead. He handed me the wine. To negotiations. We ate in comfortable silence. The food was excellent, better than excellent, and I realized Dante had layers I hadn't anticipated. Dangerous, yes, but also cultured, precise, someone who valued craft and quality. Over dessert, tiramisu he'd clearly made himself, he finally spoke. I have 3 more jobs in the next month. Vienna, Rome, Venice. Translations presents the same work you've been doing. 10,000 per job plus expenses. If you complete all three, there's a bonus. 20,000 lump sum, no strings. I set down my fork. That's 50,000 euros total. Enough to secure your grandmother's care for years, establish your own consulting practice, or walk away entirely. He drank his wine. But there are conditions. Of course there are. You move into a secured apartment I control. Not this building, but close. Safe, comfortable, monitored. You don't take other work without clearing it with me. You don't discuss our arrangements with anyone, including your grandmother, beyond the basics. And you accept that people like Marchetti will know who you are, which means you'll need security protocols. You're asking me to disappear into your world. I'm asking you to make a calculated investment in your future using resources I'm providing. At the end of the month, you'll have money, experience, and connections that will open doors. Or you can walk away now with what you've already earned and go back to serving champagne. I looked around the apartment. The art, the books, the carefully constructed life of a man who'd built himself from margins into power. What happens after the month? If I complete all three jobs, then we renegotiate again. Maybe you keep working with me, maybe you branch out with my recommendation, maybe you disappear and I never see you again. Your choice, with resources to make that choice real. He leaned back. I'm not trying to own you, Miss Santoro. I'm trying to make you valuable enough that you have options. Valuable people negotiate from strength. Desperate people accept whatever they're offered. And you'd prefer I negotiate from strength. I'd prefer you become the kind of asset I can't afford to lose, which means treating you well enough that you choose to stay. He refilled our glasses. I'm a businessman, not a romantic. I deal in incentives, not emotions. If you're valuable and treated fairly, you'll work harder and complain less. Simple. The honesty was somehow more seductive than any pretty lie would have been. I want two modifications. He raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. First, I visit my grandmother daily, security protocols or not. That's non-negotiable. Acceptable, I'll arrange a driver and basic counter-surveillance. Continue. Second, if at any point I feel like I'm being pulled into something illegal or dangerous beyond translation, I walk away with fair compensation for work completed. No questions, no retaliation. Define dangerous beyond translation. If someone points a gun at me, if I'm asked to carry anything through customs, if a meeting becomes violent, I met his eyes. I'll translate threats, I won't become one. He considered, swirling his wine. Acceptable with one modification. If you walk away under those terms, you maintain confidentiality for 5 years minimum, enforced by contract and practical incentive. I won't harm you, but I also won't let you become a liability. You're asking me to sign an NDA. I'm asking you to acknowledge that knowledge is dangerous, and I need assurance you won't monetize what you learn. He pulled a folder from the side table, already prepared, of course. Read it. Take it to a lawyer if you want. But if you're in, I need it signed before Vienna next week. I took the folder, knowing I'd sign it, knowing I'd already made this choice the moment I walked through his door. Why me? I asked quietly. There are other translators, better ones probably, people with experience in this kind of work. Because you're hungry and honest and not stupid enough to think you can con me. Because your grandmother matters more to you than money, which means you have values I can predict. And because when Marchetti tested you, you didn't flinch. He finished his wine. Most people break under pressure or perform under pressure. You just became more real. That's rare. That's not a compliment either. No, it's recognition. He stood, extending his hand. Do we have an agreement, Miss Santoro? 3 jobs, fair compensation, mutual respect for boundaries, and you walk away at the end with resources to build whatever life you want. I looked at his hand, steady, scarred across the knuckles, the hand of someone who'd fought his way to this table and this offer. I took it. We have an agreement. His grip was warm, firm, and lasted exactly 3 seconds before he released me. Good, I'll have the apartment ready by Monday. Vienna is Wednesday. Pack light, we'll be there 4 days. He walked me to the door. And Miss Santoro, thank you for trusting me enough to negotiate. Most people just accept whatever I offer. Maybe you should surround yourself with better people. Maybe, he smiled, genuine this time. Or maybe I just did. The door closed behind me, and I stood in the hallway feeling like I'd just signed a contract with consequences I couldn't fully see. My phone buzzed. Nana, are you being smart or brave, Tesoro? I texted back, I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. Her response was immediate, there is. Smart people survive. Brave people change things, try to be both. I walked out into the Milan night. Contract unsigned in my bag but decision made in my bones, and wondered which I'd become by the time this month ended. Smart or brave? Survivor or revolutionary? Chiara Santoro, invisible waitress, or whoever I was becoming in Dante Caruso's carefully constructed world. The cold bit through my coat, but I didn't feel it anymore. I was already somewhere else, already someone different, already walking toward a future I'd chosen with open eyes and closed alternatives. And that, I was learning, was how you survived when survival was the only currency that mattered. The apartment Dante secured was on Via della Spiga, which told me everything about his definition of secure. Third floor, bulletproof windows, an elevator that required both a key card and a code. Furnished with the same expensive minimalism as his place, but somehow more comfortable. Books in English and Italian, a kitchen I might actually use, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street. It's monitored, the driver, Marcus, silver-haired and professional, told me as he set down my bags. Cameras at all entrances, panic button in each room, direct line to Mr. Caruso's security if you need assistance. Don't use the panic button for spider removal. Use it if someone tries to enter who shouldn't. Has that happened before? Twice. Both times ended quickly and permanently. He handed me 3 key cards. One for you, one backup, one stays with Mr. Caruso. I'll drive you to visit your grandmother daily at 2 p.m. unless you specify otherwise. Questions. Why is Dante doing all this? Marcus smiled, first genuine expression I'd seen from him. Because he learned from his father's mistakes. His father kept people close through fear and debt. Mr. Caruso prefers loyalty built on mutual benefit. You work better when you're not worried about your safety or your grandmother. Simple math. That's remarkably pragmatic. He's a remarkably pragmatic man. Also, for what it's worth, he doesn't usually make these arrangements for temporary employees. Consider that information however you'd like. He headed toward the door. 2 p.m. tomorrow, Miss Santoro, be ready. When he left, I explored the apartment alone. Closet already stocked with clothes, not just the pieces from Zurich but more. Casual, professional, appropriate for whatever situations Dante anticipated. Bathroom with toiletries I'd mentioned once in passing that I preferred. Kitchen stocked with food I actually liked. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt considered, like someone had paid attention. The contract sat on the dining table beside a fountain pen and a card with a law firm's address. Have them review it, the note said. I'll reimburse the consultation fee. I sat down and read every word. Standard NDA with teeth, 5 years confidentiality, financial penalties for breach, arbitration clause that heavily favored Dante. But also protections. Specific definitions of dangerous work I could refuse, clear termination conditions, explicit compensation schedules. And at the bottom, a handwritten addition. This document cannot prevent you from reporting illegal activity to authorities if your safety is at risk. I won't ask you to prioritize my interests over your survival. D.C. I stared at that line for 5 minutes. Then I signed it. The next morning, a messenger collected the contract. That afternoon, Marcus drove me to the hospital where Nana was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, looking stronger than she had in months. "You've moved," she said immediately. "How did you? You're wearing clothes I've never seen and you smell like expensive soap. Also, you look terrified and determined in equal measure. That means something changed." She patted the chair beside her. "Tell me." I told her. Most of it anyway. The Vienna job, the apartment, the contract that bound me to silence and security in equal measure. I didn't tell her about Marchetti, or the implicit violence threading through Dante's world, or how I'd translated conversations that probably described murders without calling them murders. "He's making you dependent," she said when I finished. "He's making me valuable. There's a difference." "Is there, or is that what he wants you to believe?" She took my hand. "I'm not saying run, Tesoro. We need his help and you need his opportunities. But remember, every gift from a man like that comes with invisible strings. You might not feel them until it's too late to cut them." "I'll be careful." "You're already not careful. You're in too deep to be careful. Now you just have to be smart and lucky." She squeezed my hand. "I'll be gone soon, Kara. Maybe months, maybe a year if Dr. Hoffman is as good as he seems. When I'm gone, you'll have nothing tying you to this world except choices you've made. Make sure those choices are yours, not his." "Nana." "Hush, we both know I'm dying. The pneumonia bought me time, but time isn't the same as survival." Her eyes were clear, unflinching. "I want you to promise me something. When I'm gone, if you're still with him, ask yourself honestly whether you're staying because you want to or because you can't imagine another way. And if it's the second thing, if you've become so tangled in his world that you can't see the exit, promise me you'll run. Promise me you'll save yourself, even if it means losing everything he's given you." I wanted to argue, couldn't. "I promise." "Good girl." She settled back in her wheelchair. "Now tell me about Vienna. I hear it's beautiful this time of year, though probably too cold for my taste." We spent the next 2 hours talking about nothing important: travel, food, the ridiculous novels she was reading on the tablet the nurses had given her. Normal things, anchoring things. When I left, Dr. Hoffman caught me in the corridor again. "She's preparing to say goodbye. You understand that?" "Yes." "Do you understand that men like Mr. Caruso specialize in filling voids left by loss? Your grandmother is your anchor. When she's gone, you'll be vulnerable in ways you might not anticipate." "I'm not a child." "No, but you're young, and you're in territory you don't know, and he's been navigating that territory his entire life. I'm not saying he's malicious. I'm saying he's competent at getting what he wants, and right now what he wants is you, compliant, capable, and convinced that his interests align with yours. Don't they? For now, maybe, ask yourself what happens when they diverge." He handed me his card again. "Last time I'll offer. Call me if you need an exit strategy. No judgment, no payment required. Just concern from someone who's seen this pattern before." I took the card, pocketed it, and walked away feeling like everyone around me could see futures I was too close to perceive. That evening, Dante called. "The contract is countersigned. Vienna Wednesday, 6 a.m. flight. Pack for 4 days, business casual, one formal event. I'll brief you tomorrow." He paused. "How's your grandmother?" "Stable, preparing." "For what?" "The end. On her terms." I looked out my apartment window at Milan's glittering lights. "She wants me to promise I'll leave if this becomes a trap." "Smart woman, did you promise?" "Yes." "Good, that means you're thinking clearly." He sounded pleased. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. my office. We'll review Vienna protocols and discuss risk assessment. And Miss Santoro, thank you for signing the contract. I don't take your trust lightly." He ended the call before I could respond. I stood at the window for a long time, watching Milan breathe and move and live without me, wondering if I just signed away my future or secured it. Smart or brave, Nana had asked. I was starting to think I was neither. Just desperate enough, incompetent enough, and trapped enough that the distinction didn't matter anymore. Vienna was colder than Zurich and older than Milan, a city built on empire and blood and waltzes that pretended both were beautiful. We stayed at a hotel near the Opera House, Dante in a suite, me in an adjacent room connected by a door he never locked. "It's for security," he said when I noticed. "If something happens, I need to reach you quickly." The meetings were different here. Fewer bankers, more logistics people, warehouse managers, shipping coordinators, customs officials who didn't wear their corruption openly but didn't hide it either. I translated conversations about agricultural equipment that weighed suspiciously little, pharmaceutical supplies that required refrigeration but no permits, consulting fees that changed hands in cash. Nothing explicitly illegal, everything implicitly wrong. On the third day, Dante took me to a symphony, Mahler, performed in a concert hall that made me forget briefly that we were there for business. He wore a tuxedo like he'd been born in one, and I wore a dress from the apartment's closet that fit perfectly and cost more than I wanted to know. During intermission, a man approached, late 50s Austrian accent, eyes that missed nothing. "Dante, a surprise seeing you at cultural events." "Hoffman, always a pleasure." Dante's smile was perfect, meaningless. "This is my associate Chiara Santoro. Chiara, this is Karl Hoffman, director of the Vienna Customs Authority." Hoffman's handshake was dry, assessing. "Santoro, Italian." "Yes, signor." "You're far from home." He turned back to Dante. "I received your proposal regarding the transit arrangements. Interesting approach, though I have questions about documentation standards." What followed was 15 minutes of the most polite negotiation I'd ever witnessed. Two men discussing bribe structures using language so coded I barely followed it, all while sipping champagne in a concert hall surrounded by Vienna's elite. When Hoffman left, Dante took my elbow and steered me toward the exits. "We're leaving." The second half is less important than the man who just entered the balcony level, Lorenzo Marchetti, which means he's tracking us, which means we need to adjust protocols. He texted rapidly while moving. "Stay close, don't look back, and when we reach the car, get in quickly." My pulse spiked. Is he? He's not going to shoot me in the Opera House, but he's establishing that he can follow us anywhere, which is a message I need to counter. We emerged into the cold evening, and the Mercedes was already waiting, Marcus at the wheel. Dante opened the door, guided me in with a hand at my back, and slid in beside me. "The Alpine House," he told Marcus. "Sir, that's 3 hours." "I'm aware, drive." As we pulled away, I looked back and saw Marchetti standing at the Opera House entrance, watching. He raised his glass in a mocking salute. Dante didn't look back. "What's the Alpine House?" "A safe house in the mountains, secure, private, off the grid. We'll stay there tonight and reassess in the morning." He was texting again, rapid fire. "Marchetti's escalating. He shouldn't have shown himself tonight. It's sloppy and desperate, which means he's under pressure, which makes him dangerous." "Why is he after you?" "Because I took territory he wanted, used channels he thought were his, and did it more efficiently than he ever managed. Also, he blames me for his nephew's arrest last year." Dante pocketed his phone. "I had nothing to do with that arrest, but perception matters more than truth in our world." "Did you have something to do with it?" He looked at me directly. "Yes. I provided information to Italian authorities that led to the nephew's capture, but it was legitimate evidence of trafficking routes, exploitation of minors. Some lines I don't cross, even for business advantage." I stared at him. "You turned him in." "I allowed the proper authorities to discover what was already happening. There's a difference." His jaw was tight. "I'm many things, Miss Santoro, but I don't tolerate certain abuses. Marchetti's nephew was running operations that hurt children. I made sure it stopped. Marchetti sees that as betrayal. I see it as basic humanity. Something shifted in how I understood him. Not forgiveness, not approval, but recognition that his moral lines existed, even if they were drawn in places I didn't expect. Why didn't you tell me that before? Because I don't advertise my humanitarian impulses. They're considered weakness in my world. He looked out the window as Vienna disappeared behind us, replaced by dark mountains. But you asked, and I don't lie to you, even when the truth complicates things. We drove in silence, climbing into mountains I couldn't see, following roads that Marcus seemed to know without GPS. After an hour, my phone buzzed. Nana, be smart, tesoro. If he's running, ask yourself what he's running from. I didn't respond. Another text from Dr. Hoffman. Your grandmother's condition is stable. No need to rush back, but call when you can. And finally, from an unknown number. You're learning his secrets, Miss Santoro. Be careful they don't become your chains. LM. I showed that last one to Dante. Block him. He's trying to create paranoia. Is it working? That depends. Are you paranoid? I'm sitting in a car being driven to a secret location, while a man who wants you dead sends me threatening texts. So yes, I'm developing some concerns. Dante laughed, actual, genuine laughter. Fair point. Here's the truth. Marchetti wants me nervous and isolated. Sending you messages is meant to make me question your loyalty and make you question my judgment. The goal is to create friction between us that he can exploit. Will it work? Not if we're honest with each other, which is why I'm telling you this instead of pretending it's fine. He pulled out his own phone, showed me a series of messages, security updates, personnel movements, financial transfers. I'm moving resources into defensive positions. Marchetti is powerful, but he's not omnipotent. If he escalates to violence, he'll lose the institutional support that protects him. My job is to make violence his only option, then make sure he chooses wrong. That's manipulative, yes, also survival. He looked at me seriously. You can still walk away. I'll honor the contract, protect your grandmother, and ensure Marchetti knows you're not a target. But if you stay, you're acknowledging that this is what my world looks like. Strategy, pressure, calculated risk. An occasional car rides to safe houses. Exactly. I thought about Nana's promise, about Dr. Hoffman's warnings, about the fact that I could see the exit but couldn't quite make myself walk toward it. I'm staying for now. For now is enough. He settled back in his seat. Get some sleep if you can. The house is comfortable, but tomorrow we have decisions to make about how to handle Marchetti's escalation. I'll need you clear-headed. I closed my eyes but didn't sleep. Just listened to the car's engine, Marcus's steady driving, Dante's breathing beside me in the dark. And wondered how many other women had made this same choice. Staying one more day, one more job, one more step into territory they couldn't map, until staying was the only option they could see. The Alpine house was smaller than I expected, built from stone and wood that looked like they'd grown from the mountain itself. Inside was warm, fireplace already lit, windows overlooking a valley I couldn't see in the dark. There's one bedroom, one couch, Dante said, setting down his bag. You take the bedroom, I'll be up working anyway. I can. You take the bedroom, that's not negotiable. You're here because of me, the least I can do is let you sleep comfortably. He pulled a laptop from his bag. There's food in the kitchen, wine if you want it, try to rest. Tomorrow gets complicated. I retreated to the bedroom, which was simple but perfect. Down comforter, mountain views. Silence so complete it felt physical. I lay down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling, listening to Dante moving in the main room, typing, speaking quietly on the phone in languages I couldn't identify. Sometime past midnight, I gave up and went to find him. He was at the dining table, surrounded by documents, laptop glowing, glass of wine half empty. He looked up when I entered. Can't sleep. Too quiet. Ironic, most people find cities too loud. He gestured to the wine. Pour yourself some, it helps. I did, settling into the chair across from him. What are you working on? Logistics, moving resources, closing vulnerabilities, preparing for Marchetti's next move. He rubbed his eyes. Also, arranging alternative transportation for your grandmother in case Marchetti tries to use her as leverage. He won't, probably. It's too public, too obvious, but probably isn't certainly. The wine turned to ash in my mouth. He'd go after an old woman. He'd go after whatever creates pressure. Your grandmother is your vulnerability, which makes her valuable, so I'm removing that option before he thinks to use it. He showed me his laptop, security protocols, medical transportation plans, a safe location I didn't recognize. Dr. Hoffman is coordinating. She'll never know she's being protected, but she'll be untouchable. Why do you keep protecting her? You've done more than the contract requires. Because you work better when you're not terrified, and I need you working well. He closed the laptop. Also because I like her. She reminds me of my grandmother, sharp, stubborn, unwilling to pretend the world is kinder than it is. Your grandmother is still alive. Number cancer took her 5 years ago. She was the only person who ever told me the truth without hedging. He drank his wine. She told me my father was destroying everything he touched, and I'd do the same unless I learned to value people as more than assets. Took me 2 years after she died to understand she was right. And now I try to be better than he was. Build differently, treat people fairly, leave something behind that isn't just debt and corpses. He smiled slightly. I'm still figuring out how to do that while surviving the world he left me. I studied him in the firelight, sharp features softened by exhaustion, eyes that held calculations I couldn't see but could sense. Dangerous, yes, but also human in ways I hadn't expected. What will you do about Marchetti? Make him choose between attacking me and losing everything that keeps him safe. Then make sure he chooses wrong. He met my eyes. I don't want to kill him, Chiara. I want to make him irrelevant. But if he forces the choice, I'll protect myself and the people I'm responsible for. That includes you now, whether you wanted that responsibility or not. The use of my first name felt significant, intimate in a way our previous interactions hadn't been. I didn't ask to be your responsibility. No, but you took my money and my protection, which created obligation in both directions. I'm responsible for your safety. You're responsible for not making that protection impossible. He leaned forward. This is what tonight was about, me showing you the real stakes, giving you another chance to walk away before it gets worse. Will it get worse? Probably. Marchetti won't back down easily, and I can't let him win without losing everything I've built. So yes, it will escalate. The question is whether you're willing to be here when it does. I thought about Nana's promise, about smart versus brave, about the fact that walking away meant returning to invisibility, and I discovered I preferred being seen, even if the seeing came with danger. I'm here for the month at least. I'll honor the contract. That's not what I'm asking. The contract is business. I'm asking whether you trust me to keep you safe while I handle Marchetti, knowing that my definition of safe might be different from yours. Do you trust me to stay loyal while I'm watching you maneuver people like chess pieces? He considered that. Yes, I think I do. You're too honest to fake loyalty convincingly, which means if you're here, you're choosing it. That's more valuable than any contract. The fire crackled. Outside, wind moved through pine trees, and the mountain was utterly silent. Then yes, I trust you for now. For now is all I'm asking. He stood, collecting the wine glasses. Get some sleep, Chiara. Tomorrow we drive back to Vienna, finish the job, and start planning how to make Marchetti regret escalating. You'll need to be sharp. I went to the bedroom but didn't close the door. Lay in the dark listening to Dante work, his presence somehow comforting rather than threatening. And realized with perfect clarity that Nana had been right. I was too deep to be careful. Now I just had to be smart and lucky. And hope that was enough. Vienna's meetings concluded without incident. Dante secured his logistics agreements, paid his bribes in coded language, and we returned to Milan with contracts that would make him either rich or imprisoned, depending on whose version of law you believed. At the airport, he handed me an envelope. 10,000, as agreed, plus a bonus, 5,000 for handling Marchetti's intimidation without panicking. I panicked plenty. But functionally, that's the difference. He flagged his driver. You have 1 week before Rome. Spend it with your grandmother. I'll call if situations change. Dante. He turned back, and I saw exhaustion around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Thank you for protecting her, for being honest about the risks, for not pretending this is something it isn't. Something shifted in his expression. Softness, maybe, or recognition. You're welcome, try to rest, Chiara. The month gets harder from here. He left, and I stood at the arrival terminal with 15,000 euros in my account and a growing suspicion that I'd thank him for things I shouldn't be grateful for. Nana was out of bed when I visited, walking with assistance, looking more alive than I'd seen her in years. Dr. Hoffman's treatments were working, slowly, expensively, but working. You look different, she said, studying me with those sharp eyes. Older, tired, certain. Vienna was complicated. I imagine. Dr. Hoffman mentioned there was some excitement, security arrangements made on my behalf that I wasn't consulted about. Dante was being cautious. Dante was being controlling, but effectively so, I'll grant him that. She took my hand. How much longer are you planning to stay in his world? I have 2 more jobs, Rome and Venice. Then I decide. Will you decide, though? Or will there be another job, another crisis, another reason why leaving becomes impossible? Her grip tightened. I've been thinking about his father, about the Caruso family and what they were known for in Rome. And I realized something, Tesoro. The son is more dangerous than the father ever was because he makes you want to stay. His father used fear. Dante uses care. And care is much harder to escape. I'm not trying to escape. Not yet, but you will be eventually. And when that moment comes, I want you to remember something. She pulled me close, whispered against my ear. His father owed my father a debt. Money, favor, something that was never repaid before both men died. Dante may not know that, but if he does, if this whole arrangement is about settling old debts through you, then nothing he's given you is free. It's all been owed. I spread through my chest. What are you talking about? I don't know details. My father never discussed business with women because he was old-fashioned and stupid. But I remember the name Caruso, and I remember my father saying it with satisfaction after someone died. She pulled back, eyes fierce. Ask Dante. Demand the truth. And if he admits there was a debt, if this is about legacy rather than your value, then run, Cara. Run and don't look back. Nana. Promise me. If he's been using you to settle his father's debts, promise you'll leave. I wanted to argue, couldn't. I promise. She settled back, suddenly exhausted. Good. Now tell me about Vienna's pastries. I hear they're magnificent. We talked about nothing for another hour, but her words echoed in my head like church bells. That evening I called Dante. Did your father know my grandfather? Silence, long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Yes. What did he owe him? Passage out of Rome during a period of territorial conflict. My father was young, stupid, and trapped between families that wanted him dead. Your grandfather, who was connected to people my father needed favors from, arranged his escape. In return, my father promised his assistance if it was ever needed. And when my grandfather died, the debt passed to his family. Your father, then you. Another pause. I've known who you were since the moment you said your name, Chiara. The Italian phone call was chance, but your name wasn't. I've been looking for Santoro's descendants for 2 years, trying to figure out how to honor my father's debt without revealing it existed. So this was never about my skills. No, it was about both. You had the skills I needed and the name I owed. Two problems solved with one solution. His voice was careful, measured. I told you I was honest within my moral framework. This is part of that framework, honoring debts, even inherited ones, even when it's complicated. You've been paying for my grandmother's care because your father owed mine. Initially, yes. Now I'm doing it because she's extraordinary and you're valuable, and I don't separate business from decency when I don't have to. But if you want the origin, yes. It started with a debt I inherited. I sat in my expensive apartment, wearing clothes he'd bought, protected by security he'd arranged, and felt the beautiful chain Nana had warned me about tighten into clarity. Why didn't you tell me? Because you needed help, and I needed your skills, and the debt gave me a framework to offer both without it feeling like charity or exploitation. Would you have accepted if I'd said, my father owed your grandfather, so I'm paying you to work for me? You'd have run. So I offered you a job you could take on your own terms and let the debt be my private motivation. That's manipulative. Yes, also true, both things can exist simultaneously, he sighed. If you want to walk away, walk away. The debt is satisfied. I've provided care for your grandmother, given you opportunities, honored the obligation through action. You don't owe me anything, Chiara. Not labor, not loyalty, not gratitude. You never did. Then why ask me to stay for Rome and Venice? Because I want you to. Because you're good at this work and I trust you, and I've grown to value your perspective beyond what your name obligates. His voice softened. The debt got you in the door, but that's not why I want you to stay. I looked out at Milan's lights, at the life I'd stepped into without fully understanding its foundations, and made a calculation that would have terrified me a month ago. I'll think about it. Give me 3 days. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless. He paused. And Chiara, I'm sorry for not telling you sooner, for letting you think it was only about your skills. That was unfair. Yes, it was. He hung up, and I sat in the dark apartment, processing. Everything I'd thought I understood had shifted, not false exactly, but built on foundations I hadn't seen. The job was real. The danger was real. But the origin was obligation, not opportunity. Nana had been right. Debts became chains if you weren't watching. The question was whether those chains were already locked, or whether I could still slip them and walk away whole. I didn't visit my grandmother the next day. I couldn't face her knowing she'd predicted this, knowing I'd have to admit she'd been right. Instead, I spent 72 hours alone in the apartment, thinking. Dr. Hoffman called twice. I didn't answer. Dante texted once, take the time you need, no pressure. Marcus checked in through the building security. Anything you require, Miss Santoro. I required clarity. I required understanding. I required a world that made sense according to rules I could see. I got none of those things. What I got on the third day was Nana calling me directly. Stop hiding, Tesoro, come talk to me. I can't. Yes, you can. Whatever he told you, whatever you learned, I already know. I've known for weeks. Dr. Hoffman is many things, but he's a terrible liar when he thinks someone is being exploited. He told me about the debt. I arrived at the hospital an hour later, and Nana was waiting in the sunroom, looking frailer but somehow fiercer. Sit, tell me what you're thinking. I'm thinking you were right, that everything I thought was my choice was really just inherited obligation. Is that what Dante said? He said the debt got me in the door, but it's not why he wants me to stay. Do you believe him? I thought about Vienna's opera house, about Marchetti's threats, about Dante working past midnight to protect my grandmother while planning how to dismantle his enemies. Yes, I think I do. Then what's the problem? The problem is I wanted it to be real. My skills, my value, me. I wanted those to be why he chose me, not my grandfather's ghost. Nana laughed bitter, knowing. Oh, Kara, nothing is ever that simple. Yes, he inherited a debt, but you think powerful men honor their father's obligations unless it serves them. He could have paid me off directly, sent a check, and called it settled. Instead, he created an arrangement that gave you opportunities and gave him assets. That's not obligation. That's strategy. That's worse. No, it's smarter. And it means he values you beyond the debt, or he wouldn't have structured it this way. She leaned forward. Here's what you need to understand. The debt was a door. What you do once you've walked through determines whether you're trapped or free. If you stay because you feel obligated, trapped. If you stay because you choose to, knowing all the terms, free. How do I know the difference? You ask yourself, if the debt was settled tomorrow, if Dante said, we're even, you can go, would you stay? I sat with that question, turning it over like a stone in my palm. Would I? I thought about the work, challenging, demanding, using skills I'd buried under minimum wage jobs. I thought about Dante's world, dangerous, yes, but also precise, elegant, built on foundations I was beginning to understand. I thought about the person I was becoming, visible, valuable, certain in ways I'd never been when I was invisible. I don't know, I said finally. I don't know if I'd stay. Then you have your answer. You're not ready to decide, so don't. She squeezed my hand. Finish the month. Do Rome and Venice. Take his money and his opportunities and his dangerous work. And at the end, when you know who you are with and without him, make your choice. But make it yours, Tesoro. Not his, not mine, not your grandfather's ghost. Yours. What if I choose wrong? Then you'll learn from it and choose differently next time. That's called living. She settled back. Now tell me, are you going to finish the contract? I thought about 15,000 euros in my account, about Nana's improving health, about the fact that walking away now meant all of this, the danger, the truth, the realization, had been for nothing. Yes, I'm going to finish. Good, then call Dante and tell him. The man's been checking my medical reports like they're stock prices. Put him out of his misery. I called from the hospital corridor. Dante answered on the first ring. Chiara. I'm in for Rome and Venice. Contract stands, but I need one more term. Name it. At the end, when the month is done, you tell me honestly whether you'd want me to stay if the debt didn't exist. Not to honor your father, not to settle old obligations. Just because you value what I bring. And if the answer is no, I walk away with no hard feelings and you ensure Nana's care continues for a year regardless. Silence. Agreed. With one addition, if the answer is yes, you tell me honestly whether you'd stay if the debt didn't exist. Because I don't want you here out of obligation either. Fair. Good, Rome is next week. I'll send details tomorrow. And Chiara, he paused. Thank you for staying, for making this choice with open eyes. That matters to me more than you probably realize. Why? Because my father kept people through fear and debt. I'm trying to build something different. You're proof that maybe it's working. He hung up, and I stood in the hospital corridor, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the shuffle of nurses, feeling like I'd just made a choice that would define everything that came next. Smart or brave? Survivor or revolutionary? Chiara Santoro, caught between her grandfather's debt and her own future. I walked back to Nana's room, and she looked up with a smile that said she'd heard every word. Well, I'm staying for now. Good girl, now let's talk about Venice. I've always wanted to visit. Tell me you'll take pictures. We talked about travel and beauty, and all the things that felt normal and safe and completely disconnected from the world I was navigating. And I tried not to think about what would happen when the month ended, and I had to answer Dante's question honestly. Would I stay? I didn't know, but I knew I'd find out soon enough. Rome in March was chaos and beauty, history and traffic, churches and sirens all braided together into a city that refused to be just one thing. Dante had business here that went deeper than logistics. This was territory his father had operated in, connections he'd inherited, a network he was trying to reshape into something less explicitly criminal. We stayed in Trastevere, in a building that looked residential from outside but was clearly fortified. Dante took the third floor, I took the second, and security I never saw but always sensed moved through the spaces between. Rome's different, Dante said over breakfast our first morning. Milan is business, Zurich is banking, Vienna is logistics, Rome is legacy, who your family was, who they owed, who they destroyed. My father's history is written all over this city, and not in ways that make my work easier. Then why come back? Because running from legacy gives it power. Better to face it, dismantle it, rebuild something different from the ruins. He drank his espresso. This week, you'll meet people who knew my father. They'll test you, not obviously, but constantly, trying to determine whether I'm like him or different. How you translate their questions will tell them more than how I answer. What do you want them to think? That I'm my father's son when it serves me, and my own man when it doesn't. Consistent enough to trust, unpredictable enough to fear, perfectly balanced on the line between inheritance and revolution. The meetings were intense. Old men in old cafes speaking in idioms I struggled to parse, young men in new buildings trying to prove they'd evolved past their father's methods. Dante navigated both with equal facility, speaking different dialects of the same language, adapting his presentation like a performance artist. And through it all, Lorenzo Marchetti's shadow loomed. He's here, Dante said on our third day, showing me a text from one of his sources. Not interfering yet, just observing, waiting to see if I'll make a mistake on territory he considers his. What kind of mistake? The violent kind, the kind that gives him justification to move against me with community support. Dante's jaw tightened. He's trying to bait me into overreacting, proving I'm just my father's violent legacy in expensive suits. I need to prove I'm something else. That afternoon, we had a meeting that felt different from the start. A warehouse in the industrial district, surrounded by security that looked ex-military. Inside, 3 men waited, younger than most of Dante's contacts, dangerous in a way that felt immediate rather than historical. The leader was called Alessio. He did not offer his hand. Caruso, you've been making waves in markets that were stable before you arrived. Stable often means stagnant. I'm offering efficiency. You're offering disruption. My suppliers don't like uncertainty. Your suppliers don't like competition. There's a difference. Dante remained calm, hands visible, voice level. I'm not here to eliminate you, Alessio. I'm here to propose collaboration. You have distribution networks I need. I have capital and logistics infrastructure you could use. We can fight for scraps or we can build something larger together. And if I prefer fighting, then you'll lose, but it will take resources and time neither of us can spare. And while we're destroying each other, Marchetti will move into the vacuum we create. Dante leaned forward slightly. I'm offering you a partnership because it's smarter than war, not because I'm afraid of war. Alessio studied him, then looked at me. Your translator. She understands what we're really discussing. She understands that you're deciding whether to accept profitable collaboration or expensive conflict. Beyond that, she's translating words, not making judgments. Dante's voice sharpened slightly. She's also not relevant to your decision. Focus on the offer, not the messenger. I focus on everything. Alessio switched to a dialect so regional I barely caught it, asking whether I was Dante's mistress or just his employee. I translated exactly what he said, keeping my voice neutral. Dante smiled, cold, dangerous. Tell Alessio that Miss Santoro is a professional colleague whose personal relationship to me is none of his concern, and tell him in his grandmother's dialect, so he understands I'm paying attention to every word. I did, matching the cadence, watching Alessio's face shift. You're better than your father. He would have pulled a gun by now. My father's approach got him killed. I prefer efficiency. Dante pulled out a folder. Here's the partnership structure. Review it, discuss with your people, and give me an answer by Friday. If you decline, I'll respect that and we'll operate in different spheres. But if you accept, we'll both profit significantly. Alessio took the folder, nodded, and left without another word. In the car afterward, I finally spoke. That was a threat disguised as a business proposal. Yes, but a legitimate one. Everything I offered is real: the partnership, the profit structure, the mutual benefit. It's also real that if he refuses, I'll outcompete him until he's irrelevant. Both things are true. Dante looked at me. How did it feel, translating that? Like I was facilitating something between negotiation and extortion. Accurate assessment. Welcome to my world, where the difference between business and coercion is mostly presentation. That evening, Dante took me to dinner at a restaurant his grandmother had loved. Small, family-run, no menu. You ate what the chef decided to make. She brought me here after my father died, Dante said over wine that tasted like cherries in summer. Told me I had two choices: become him or become something different. But she also told me that different didn't mean weak, just strategic. Did you believe her? Not at first. I spent 2 years trying to be him, loud, violent, certain. Made a lot of enemies, almost got killed 3 times, and realized I was terrible at being my father. He smiled slightly. So I tried being myself instead. Quieter, smarter, willing to negotiate before shooting. Turns out that works better. Do you ever miss it? The simple violence? Sometimes. It's clarifying in a way: problem exists, eliminate problem, move forward. But it's also expensive and attracts attention. He refilled our glasses. What I do now is harder but more sustainable, and it lets me sleep at night mostly. Mostly. I've done things I'm not proud of, Chiara. Hurt people who probably deserved it, but maybe not the way I hurt them. Made decisions that benefited me at others' expense. I'm not a good man, even if I'm trying to build something better than my father did. Why tell me that? Because in 3 weeks you'll have to decide whether to stay. And I want that decision based on who I actually am, not who you might imagine I could be. He met my eyes. I'm competent, strategic, occasionally ruthless, and trying to be better than my bloodline suggests I should be. That's the truth. If it's enough, if you can work with that, then maybe we continue. If not, then you walk away knowing exactly what you're walking away from. The honesty was devastating in its completeness. What do you want me to say? Nothing right now, just no, really no, and then make your choice accordingly. We finished dinner in comfortable silence, and when we left, Dante's hand at my back felt less like possession and more like acknowledgement of my autonomy, my choice, my right to walk away when the truth became too heavy. Back at the building, he walked me to my floor. Tomorrow we meet with Alessio's boss, the man who actually controls distribution networks in central Italy. It'll be more formal, more dangerous, and more important than anything we've done before. He paused at the door. If you want to back out, now's the time. No judgment, contract honored, obligations released. I should have said yes, should have taken the exit he was offering. Instead, I said, I'll be ready. His expression shifted, relief, maybe, or recognition. Good, because I need you there. Not because of the debt, not because of obligation. Because you're good at this and I trust you, and I'm fairly certain tomorrow's meeting will determine whether I survive the next 6 months. You think it's that serious? I think Alessio's boss is being pressured by Marchetti to reject my proposal, and if he does, it'll start a series of conflicts I might not win. He looked tired suddenly, and I realized how much weight he was carrying. So yes, it's that serious. Then I'll make sure the translations are perfect. I know you will. That's why I wanted you in the first place. He stepped back. Get some sleep, Chiara. Tomorrow we find out if I'm my father's son or something different." He disappeared upstairs, and I stood alone on my floor, feeling the weight of tomorrow settle over me like snow. Smart or brave? Survivor or revolutionary? Tomorrow I'd find out which I was becoming. The meeting with Alessio's boss took place in a church, which should have been ridiculous but somehow made perfect sense in Rome, where power and religion had been dancing together for millennia. We arrived at dawn. The church was small, baroque, beautiful in the way only centuries of art and prayer can create. Alessio's boss was already waiting in a pew near the altar, late 60s, silver hair, expensive suit, eyes that had seen everything and forgiven nothing. His name was Carlo Benedetti, and within 5 minutes I understood he was the most dangerous person I'd ever met. Not because he threatened, because he didn't need to. Dante Caruso, finally we meet properly. His Italian was educated, formal, the language of power that didn't need to prove itself. Your father and I did business occasionally. He was passionate. My father was a hammer looking for nails. I prefer to be a scalpel. Dante sat across from him, maintaining perfect calm. Thank you for agreeing to this conversation. I agreed because refusing would have been insulting, and insults are expensive. Benedetti studied me. Your translator. She carries your father's debt in her bloodline, I understand. Dante's expression didn't change, but I felt him go still. Ancient history, signor, not relevant to today's discussion. Everything is relevant. History, blood, debt. These are the currencies of our world. Benedetti looked at me directly. Tell me, Miss Santoro, do you understand what your grandfather did for the Caruso family? I glanced at Dante, who nodded slightly. Permission to answer honestly. He helped Dante's father escape a dangerous situation. In return, the Caruso family owed assistance if needed. A generous interpretation. Your grandfather also ensured that 3 of his rivals disappeared during that escape, creating the power vacuum that let Caruso Sr. establish his operations in Rome. Your grandfather was not a kind man, Miss Santoro. He was an efficient one. The words hit like stones. My grandfather, the man in Nana's stories, who died before I was born, had been complicit in murders that built Dante's father's empire. I didn't know that. Few descendants do. We prefer clean legacies. Benedetti turned back to Dante. Which brings us to you. Are you your father's son or your grandfather's or something entirely new? I'm trying to be something new, but I'm practical enough to use what I inherited when necessary. Dante pulled out his proposal. This partnership benefits everyone, streamlines operations, reduces violence, increases profit. But it also shifts power structures, which is why you're meeting me in a church instead of an office. You're deciding if I'm worth the risk. I'm deciding if you'll survive long enough to make the partnership worthwhile. Lorenzo Marchetti wants you dead, and he has resources I can't ignore. Marchetti wants everyone dead who threatens his territory. The question is whether you want to be dependent on him or whether you want options. Dante's voice was level, precise. I'm offering you independence from Marchetti's network. That has value beyond profit. It also has cost. If I partner with you, I become your ally against him. That's not a decision I make lightly. I'm not asking you to fight my battles. I'm asking you to stay neutral and profit while I handle Marchetti myself. If I fail, you haven't lost anything. If I succeed, you gain a more efficient partner than Marchetti ever was. Benedetti considered this, then looked at me again. Miss Santoro, one more question. Do you think Dante Caruso is a man worth betting on? The question hung in the cold church air, loaded with implications I couldn't fully parse. I thought about Vienna's opera house, about the Alpine safe house, about Dante working past midnight to protect my grandmother while planning how to survive the world his father left him. I think he's trying to be different from his father while surviving the consequences of his father's choices. I think that's harder than just being violent or just being legitimate, and I think he's doing it well. I met Benedetti's eyes. Whether that's worth betting on depends on whether you value innovation over tradition, but if you're asking whether I trust him, yes, I do. Something shifted in Benedetti's expression. Approval, maybe, or reassessment. A loyal translator, rare in our world. He stood, signaling the meeting's end. I'll review your proposal, Dante. You'll have my answer by Sunday. Until then, stay visible and don't give Marchetti opportunities. He's looking for excuses. Understood. Thank you, Don Benedetti. We left through the church's side entrance, emerging into Roman sunlight that felt surreal after the dim interior. In the car, Dante finally exhaled. That was risky, answering his question directly. Was I supposed to deflect? Most people would have. You endorsed me without hedging, which either makes Benedetti trust your judgment or question whether you're too compromised to be objective. He looked at me. I'm grateful, but also concerned. If Benedetti thinks you're just my mouthpiece, you become less valuable as a translator. Do you think I'm compromised? I think you're invested, which is different. And I think Benedetti saw that difference, which is why your endorsement mattered. He rubbed his face, exhaustion showing through. God, I hate Rome. Every conversation here is a chess game, and I'm always 3 moves behind tradition. But you're still playing. Because walking away isn't an option. Not until I've proven I'm different from my father, or at least that I'm trying to be. He checked his phone. We have the rest of the day off. Do you want to see Rome properly, not the dangerous meetings version? I looked at him. Dangerous, yes, but also human, also tired, also trying. Yes, show me your grandmother's Rome, the version she loved. He smiled, genuine, unguarded. That I can do. We spent the afternoon like tourists, visiting churches and fountains and corners of the city that had nothing to do with business or blood. Dante was a surprisingly good guide, knowledgeable about history, passionate about architecture, willing to spend 20 minutes explaining why one Baroque facade was important while another was merely decorative. As the sun set, we sat at a cafe near the Pantheon, drinking wine and watching Rome breathe around us. Thank you, Dante said quietly, for today, for the meeting, for staying when you could have walked away. You're welcome, though I'm not sure I've done you any favors, if Benedetti says no. Then I handle Marchetti differently, but either way I'm grateful you were there. He hesitated, then continued. In 3 weeks, when the month ends, when we have to answer each other's questions honestly, I want you to know that my answer is already yes. I want you to stay even if the debt didn't exist, even if you weren't useful, just because I've grown to value you beyond any professional utility. The words settled over me, warm and terrifying. That's not fair, telling me your answer before I've decided mine. I know, but I wanted you to have time to think about it, knowing that staying is a genuine option I'm offering because I want to, not because I have to. And if I say no, then I honor the contract, ensure your grandmother's care, and let you go without resentment or retaliation. Clean break, mutual respect, no strings. He met my eyes. But I hope you say yes. I hope you choose this, choose me, choose this work, because it matters to you beyond the money. I couldn't answer, not yet. So I just nodded, and we finished our wine in silence, and watched Rome transform from golden sunset to blue twilight. And I tried not to think about the choice that was racing toward me like a train I couldn't stop. 3 weeks left. 3 weeks to decide if I was smart or brave, survivor or revolutionary, Chiara Santoro or someone entirely new. The city glittered around us, beautiful and ancient and indifferent to my crisis. And Dante sat beside me, dangerous and hopeful, and somehow both the trap and the key to escape. I just had to figure out which mattered more. Benedetti's answer came on Sunday morning, a single text to Dante's phone. Partnership accepted, terms as proposed, welcome to the network. Dante stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to me. That's it, that's what shifts everything. With Benedetti's support, Marchetti loses his leverage in central Italy. He can still cause problems, but he can't destroy me. Is it over then, the danger? No, now it gets worse because Marchetti will see this as betrayal and escalate accordingly. But at least now I'm not fighting alone. He pocketed his phone. We need to move faster than planned. Venice this week, then back to Milan. I want you secured before Marchetti makes his move. Venice was beautiful and strange. A city built on impossible foundations that somehow hadn't collapsed under centuries of weight. We stayed on Giudecca, away from tourist chaos, in a building that looked like it had been sleeping since the Renaissance. The business here was quieter: art dealers, import-export coordinators, people who moved money through beauty and culture. Dante negotiated with gallery owners and shipping contractors, all of it technically legitimate, all of it probably hiding something darker beneath the surface. On our third day, Marchetti finally made his move. Not violent, something worse. Financial police raided the gallery where we were meeting, citing irregularities in customs documentation. They detained everyone present, including Dante and me, for questioning. Polite, professional, absolutely deliberate in its timing and target. In the interrogation room, Dante was calm as glass. This is harassment and we both know it. You have no grounds for detention. The officer smiled slightly. We have reports of suspicious transactions, undocumented imports, possible involvement in smuggling networks, standard investigation procedures. Procedures that coincidentally target me the week after I secured a partnership with Carlo Benedetti. How fortunate for Lorenzo Marchetti. I don't know what you're implying. You know exactly what I'm implying. And you know that when my lawyers dismantle this investigation in the next 6 hours, the questions will shift from my business practices to who authorized this raid and why. Dante leaned back. So here's what's going to happen. You'll release me and my associate with apologies. You'll discover that the irregularities were administrative errors, and you'll quietly note in your report that pursuing this further would be complicated. You're very certain of yourself. I'm certain of what I can prove and who will be embarrassed when I prove it. He pulled out his phone, somehow not confiscated, and made a call. Marco, I need Senator Grassi on the phone. Yes, now. Tell him it's about the Venice Cultural Preservation Fund he's so proud of, and how certain financial police activities might complicate its funding. Within an hour, we were released. No apologies, but no charges either. In the car back to the hotel, Dante was rigid with controlled fury. That was Marchetti testing boundaries, seeing if he could use institutional power against me without direct confrontation. It won't work, but it's expensive to defend against and distracts from actual business. What do you do now? Demonstrate that institutional power cuts both ways. He made 3 calls in rapid succession, to lawyers, to contacts, to someone who apparently controlled significant political leverage in Rome. By tomorrow, the officer who authorized that raid will be reassigned to a desk position. By next week, Marchetti will understand that using police as weapons costs more than he's willing to pay. You're scaring me. Good, you should be scared. Marchetti's escalating toward violence, and when he does, people around me become targets. He looked at me seriously. This is what I meant about danger, not the abstract kind, the real kind. If you want to walk away before it gets worse, now's the time. I thought about Nana's promise, about Dr. Hoffman's warnings, about the fact that I could see the exit but was no longer sure I wanted to take it. I'm staying until the month ends at least. I said I would. Why? Not challenging, genuinely asking. Because I want to see how this ends. Because I've never done anything that mattered before, and this, even the dangerous parts, this matters. I met his eyes. And because I think you need someone around who will tell you when you're being stupid. He laughed, actual laughter, tension breaking. I do need that very much, he sobered. One more week, then you decide, but know this, if you choose to stay past the month, I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. That's not a promise I make lightly. I know. We finished Venice without further incident, though I felt eyes watching everywhere we went. Marchetti's people, probably, or Benedetti's, or just the natural paranoia that comes from knowing you're visible in ways you can't control. On the flight back to Milan, Dante worked in silence, preparing for whatever came next. I watched clouds pass below and thought about my life 1 month ago, invisible, poor, desperate. Compared to now, visible, compensated, choosing between safety and significance. My phone buzzed. Nana, Dr. Hoffman says I'm doing well enough to go home next week, thanks to you and your dangerous employer. When do you decide? Me soon. Are you ready for the answer? Nana, I'm ready for you to be ready. That's different. Wise woman. Back in Milan, Dante drove me to the hospital himself instead of sending Marcus. I want to see her, he said, if she'll allow it. Nana was packing, or directing nurses in packing, since she wasn't supposed to exert herself. She looked up when we entered, saw Dante, and went very still. So the benefactor returns. Signora Santoro, you look well. I look alive, which is different than I expected a month ago. So thank you, I suppose, for honoring your father's debt by keeping me that way. It started as obligation, it's continued as respect. Dante moved closer. I knew your father's reputation, careful, strategic, willing to do difficult things when necessary. You're like him, I think, clear-eyed about cost. I'm old, not stupid, and I see what you're doing, making my granddaughter valuable to you so she can't leave without losing everything you've given us. That's manipulation, Mr. Caruso, even if it's polite manipulation. Yes, but it's also genuine opportunity. I'm not trapping her. I'm offering her a choice that actually exists, rather than the false choice between poverty and slavery most people get. He met Nana's fierce gaze. I care about Chiara, not because I'm supposed to, not because of my father's debt, but because she's competent and honest and makes me want to be better than my bloodline suggests. If she leaves, I'll be disappointed but respectful. If she stays, I'll ensure she has autonomy, respect, and resources. Either way, your care continues for as long as you need it. Pretty words. Honest ones. I've told your granddaughter, I'm not a good man, but I'm trying to be better than my father was, and having someone around who calls me on my nonsense helps with that goal. Nana studied him, then looked at me. He means it. The words, the intent. He's dangerous, but he's not lying. Back to Dante. She's stronger than you think. If she chooses you, it'll be real. If she leaves, don't you dare punish her for it. I won't, you have my word. Your word, like your father's word that got my father killed. Dante went very still. Oh yes, I know that story too. How your father promised protection, then arranged for my father to be in exactly the wrong place when rivals came looking for revenge. Convenient debt repayment, that. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, but now you do. So here's my price for approving whatever's happening between you and my granddaughter. You tell her the whole truth. Not the sanitized version, not the strategic revelation. Everything your father did, everything you're doing, every risk she's taking by staying in your world. Give her actual choice, not manipulated choice. Dante nodded slowly. Agreed, she deserves that. He looked at me. Tomorrow I'll tell you everything, then you decide. He left and Nana squeezed my hand. Whatever he tells you tomorrow, that's the truth that matters. Not the pretty presentation, not the strategic disclosure. The ugly truth underneath. Listen carefully, Tesoro, then choose with your whole heart. I will. Good girl, now help me pack. This hospital has terrible coffee and I'm ready to go home. I helped her pack, making small talk, avoiding the massive conversation we both knew was coming. Tomorrow Dante would tell me everything. And then I'd have to decide. Smart or brave, survivor or revolutionary. the woman I'd been or the woman I was becoming. One more day. Then everything would change, one way or another. Dante's apartment felt different when I arrived the next evening, quieter, more intimate, like he'd cleared out anything that wasn't essential. He opened the door wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and I realized I'd never seen him this informal, this unguarded. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I promised your grandmother I'd listen to the whole truth, so here I am." He gestured to the couch. "Wine. Please." He poured 2 glasses, sat across from me and took a breath. My father was a criminal, not in the abstract way where everyone's a little corrupt. He was actively, deliberately, violently criminal. He smuggled weapons, laundered money for organizations I won't name, and arranged for the deaths of at least 7 people I know about. Probably more. "I know that. You know the outline. Here's the detail. Your grandfather was complicit in all of it. He wasn't an innocent bystander who helped once. He was an active partner who provided intelligence, logistics, and cover for operations that got people killed, including, eventually, himself. My father betrayed him when it became convenient, arranging for your grandfather to take the fall for operations that were actually my father's fault." The words hit like stones. My grandfather, Nana's beloved husband, had been a criminal who'd been murdered by his partner. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I was ashamed. My father destroyed your family to save himself, then left me a debt I didn't know how to repay except by protecting what remained, you and your grandmother. But telling you meant admitting my father was worse than just dangerous. He was betrayer, a user, someone who saw people as disposable tools. And you, are you like him?" Dante met my eyes. "Sometimes, when I have to be. I've betrayed rivals when necessary, used information to destroy people's operations, made choices that benefited me at others' expense. But I draw lines my father didn't. I don't hurt civilians, I don't traffic in exploitation, and I don't betray partnerships once they're established. I'm trying to build something different, but I'm using tools he gave me, which means I'm never entirely separate from his legacy." "Tell me the worst thing you've done." He flinched but didn't look away. "I provided information to police that led to the arrest of a rival's brother. The brother wasn't guilty of the specific crimes I reported. He was guilty of other things, but not those. I framed him, essentially, to eliminate competition. He's serving 15 years for crimes I invented evidence for." The honesty was devastating. "You framed an innocent man." "I framed a guilty man for different crimes than he committed. Still wrong, still unforgivable, but not quite the same as destroying someone who'd done nothing." He rubbed his face. "I tell myself it's different, that he deserved punishment even if not for those specific things. But I know what I did. I used institutional power to eliminate a threat, and an imperfect man is rotting in prison because of it." "Why tell me this?" "Because if you stay, if you choose to be part of this, you need to know who I actually am, not who I present myself as. I'm strategic, ruthless, willing to bend rules and occasionally break them. I'm trying to be better, but better is still compromised." He leaned forward. "I will never lie to you, Chiara. I might not volunteer information, but if you ask directly, I'll tell you the truth even when it costs me. That's the only promise I can make, honesty within the structure we build together." I sat with that, turning it over. "What happens if I leave, really?" "I honor the contract, 50,000 euros total, your grandmother's care for a year, no retaliation or resentment. I'll be disappointed, but I'll respect your choice and ensure you can leave cleanly." He smiled slightly. "I might also try to convince you otherwise, but I won't trap you or manipulate you. You'll have genuine freedom to walk away." "And if I stay?" "Then we renegotiate. Better compensation, real equity in legitimate operations I'm building, autonomy over which jobs you take. You become a partner, not an employee. Someone I consult with, not just someone who executes my plans. And I continue protecting your grandmother as long as she lives, not out of obligation, but because I've grown to care about both of you beyond any professional utility. That's a lot of promises. Yes, because I want you to stay and I'm willing to back that desire with actual structure and commitment. He set down his wine. But only if you want it. Not because you feel obligated, not because you're trapped, but because you choose this life knowing all its complications. I looked at him, dangerous, honest, trying so hard to be different from the father who destroyed everything he touched. I thought about Nana's promise, about Dr. Hoffman's warnings, about the woman I'd been 1 month ago and the woman I was now. I thought about invisibility versus significance, safety versus meaning, the life I'd had versus the life I was building. And I made my choice. I need 3 conditions. His expression shifted, hope careful and controlled. Name them. First, I get quarterly reports on your operations. Not details that would incriminate me, but enough transparency that I'm never surprised by what I'm involved in. If something makes me uncomfortable, I can veto my participation without penalty. Agreed, continue. Second, my grandmother's care extends beyond a year if needed, and if she passes, her funeral and estate costs are covered. I won't leave debts behind. Already planned for. Third condition. If I ever want to leave, if this becomes too much, if I change my mind, if circumstances shift, I can walk away with 6 months' notice and without retaliation. Clean exit, professional separation, no burning bridges. He considered, then nodded. Agreed, with one addition. If you leave under those terms, you still maintain confidentiality, and I still ensure you have resources to establish whatever comes next. Partnership doesn't end just because employment does. Fair. So, he looked at me with something that might have been vulnerability. Are you staying, Chiara Santoro? I thought about smart versus brave, about survival versus revolution, about the fact that I'd found something I'd never expected, work that mattered, a man who challenged me, a life that felt significant even in its complications. Yes, I'm staying, not because of your father's debt, not because I'm trapped, but because I choose this. I choose you. I choose the risk and the work and the person I'm becoming in your world. The relief on his face was so complete it almost broke me. Thank you for trusting me, for choosing this with open eyes. He stood, extended his hand. Partners then, equal respect, mutual protection, honest navigation of whatever comes next. I took his hand, and this time the grip lasted longer, warm, certain, binding. Partners, but if you ever lie to me, then you leave and I deserve it. I'm many things, Chiara, but I'm not a liar, not to you, not anymore. He pulled me up, and suddenly we were close, closer than we'd been except for necessity, close enough that I could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, smell cedar and smoke cologne, feel heat radiating from him. Can I kiss you? His voice was low, careful. Not as your employer, not as manipulation, but because I've wanted to since Vienna and I'm tired of pretending I don't. I should have said no, should have maintained professional boundaries, should have protected myself from this particular complication. Instead, I said yes. He kissed me like he negotiated, carefully at first, testing boundaries, then with increasing certainty as I responded. His hand cupped my face, thumb tracing my jawline, and I felt that touch everywhere. It was slow and deep and honest, all the things our arrangement was trying to be, and when we finally broke apart, I was breathless and certain and terrified in equal measure. I couldn't finish the sentence. A complication, he supplied, but an honest one. I won't ask for more than you want to give, Chiara. This stays at whatever pace makes sense for both of us. That might be the most terrifying thing you've said, because it means this is real, not just strategic. It's real, inconveniently, dangerously real. He stepped back, giving me space. But we have time to figure out what that means. For now, you're staying, we're partners, and whatever else develops between us can develop at its own pace." I nodded, still processing the kiss, the choice, the shift from employee to partner to something else entirely. I should go, process everything. "Of course, Marcus will drive you." He walked me to the door, then paused. "Thank you, Chiara, for staying, for choosing this, for making me believe I might actually be different from my father." "You already are. He would never have told me the truth." "No, he wouldn't have." He smiled, genuine, unguarded. "See you tomorrow. We have work to do, and now we do it together." I left, rode the elevator down, and found Marcus waiting with the car. In the backseat, I sat in stunned silence, replaying everything. The truth about my grandfather, Dante's confession, the kiss that had shifted everything. My phone buzzed. "Nana, did you choose smart or brave?" "Me both, I'm staying." "Nana, good girl. Now don't make me regret being right about you." I laughed, actual laughter, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. I'd chosen. Not smart, not brave, but something else. Honest, complicated, real. I'd chosen Dante, Caruso's dangerous world, and whatever partnership we were building from the ruins of our father's legacies. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like the rightest wrong choice I'd ever made. Nana came home 3 days later, and the apartment Dante arranged was perfect. Ground floor for accessibility, visiting nurses, all her favorite things somehow magically present. She settled into her chair by the window and looked at me with knowing eyes. "So you chose him." "I chose the work. He's just part of the package." Lies we tell ourselves. But she was smiling. "I'm glad, Tesoro, terrified for you, but glad. You look alive in a way you haven't since your parents died." "Is that worth the risk?" "Only you can answer that, but I'd rather see you alive and endangered than safe and hollow." She squeezed my hand. "Just promise me one thing, don't lose yourself in his world. Keep some part of you that's only yours, that he can't touch or change. That's how you survive partnership without becoming possession." "I'll try. That's all I ask." That evening, Dante called. Marchetti made his move. Financial investigation, asset seizure attempts, public accusations of fraud. It's all coordinated, all designed to destroy me systematically. His voice was tight. "I need to disappear for a week, maybe two. Let him think he's winning while I dismantle his support structure from the margins." "Where will you go?" "Better you don't know. Plausible deniability if anyone asks." He paused. "Marcus will stay with you. Security's been upgraded around your grandmother's apartment. And Chiara, don't take unnecessary risks while I'm gone. Marchetti knows you matter to me now, which makes you valuable as leverage." "I'll be careful." "Good. I'll contact you when it's safe. Until then, trust Marcus, trust your instincts, and remember you have that panic button if anything feels wrong." He hung up, and I sat in my apartment, suddenly aware of how much I'd come to rely on his presence. The week passed in strange suspension. I visited Nana daily, worked on improving my German and French, and tried not to imagine what Dante was doing while dismantling Marchetti's support structure. On the 8th day, Marcus appeared at my door with a phone I'd never seen. "From Mr. Caruso, encrypted, he'll call in 10 minutes." When Dante called, he sounded exhausted but satisfied. "It's done." Marchetti's institutional support collapsed. The financial investigation was revealed as politically motivated. His assets are under scrutiny, and his rivals are moving into territory he can't defend. He's not destroyed, but he's contained. "How did you?" "Better you don't know specifics, but I'm coming back tomorrow. I need to see you. There's something we need to discuss." He arrived at noon, looking thinner, harder, like he'd aged a year in 8 days. But his eyes were clear, certain. "I have a proposal, not a job, an opportunity." "I'm listening." "I'm transitioning operations. Everything questionable is being gradually shut down or transferred to people who can handle the legal exposure. I'm moving into legitimate business, real estate, consulting, import-export that's actually import-export. It'll take 2 years, maybe 3, but I'm getting out. I stared at him. Why? Because I'm tired. Because I want to build something that lasts beyond me. Because I met someone who makes me want to be better than my bloodline. He took my hand. And because I'm asking you to build it with me, not as my employee, not as my translator, but as my actual partner. Equal equity, equal voice, equal risk and reward. That's insane, also necessary. I can't do this alone, Chiara. I don't want to. And I trust you more than anyone I've ever met, which is probably stupid but also true. I looked at our joined hands, at his face, at the future he was offering that was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. What about Marchetti? Neutralized. He'll cause small problems, but he's lost the power to destroy me. We're free, as much as anyone in our world can be. And my grandmother. Cared for always, that's not negotiable. He squeezed my hand. What do you say, Chiara Santoro? Want to build something beautiful from the ruins of our father's mistakes? I thought about smart versus brave, about survival versus revolution, about the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. Yes, partner, equal terms, equal risk. Let's build something different. He kissed me then, deep, certain, honest, and I kissed him back, choosing this future with open eyes and full heart. Outside, Milan stretched toward spring, and somewhere my grandfather's ghost and Dante's father's ghost were probably arguing about whether we were brilliant or stupid. We were both, probably. But we were also free, and partners, and building something new from old debts finally paid in full. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 6 months later, Nana died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by flowers and family and the kind of quiet dignity she'd always deserved. Dante arranged a funeral that would have made her laugh. Too expensive, too elaborate, too obviously performed by someone who'd learned how to honor the dead from watching too many movies. But it was beautiful, and I was grateful. 2 years later, our first legitimate company was profitable, international consulting, completely legal, boring in the best possible way. Dante still had shadows in his past, and occasionally they surfaced as complications we had to manage. But we managed them together, partners in every sense. 3 years later, on a terrace overlooking Lake Como, Dante asked me to marry him with a ring that had been his grandmother's and words that were characteristically honest. I'm still dangerous, still flawed, still trying to outrun my father's legacy, but I love you and I want to build a life with you that's nothing like what we inherited. Will you marry me, Chiara Santoro? I said yes, because smart and brave had finally converged into the same choice. We married in spring, small ceremony, just people who mattered. No ghosts, no debts, just two people who'd chosen each other with clear eyes and full hearts. And sometimes, late at night, I thought about the woman I'd been, invisible, desperate, pouring champagne for people who'd never see me. And I thought about the woman I'd become, visible, valued, building empires from ruins. And I was grateful for both. For the desperation that had opened the door. For the choice to walk through it. For the partner who'd offered me danger and honesty, and a future I could shape with my own hands. We didn't get a happy ending. We got something better, a complicated, beautiful, honest beginning that we built together, day by day, choice by choice, from cold February nights to warm, chosen mornings. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.